Welcome back to the Bootleg Book Club. We've been gone for a while, and we are here for a special series called the Single Girl Summer Series. It is an opportunity to basically revamp and come back out with our podcast, as well as take the time to discuss what singleness means to us as individuals, and also what it means to not be defined by our status as being single, but embracing where we are in our lives at this time. And we've opened it up to friends, and that's why we also have someone else joining us on the call today and in our recording today. So for our first book of this series, we read or listened to Arrangements in Blue by Amy Key. And this book was part poetry, part memoir to me. And it really talks about her years being a single woman and how that's impacted her view of herself and how that's impacted how she goes through, how she walks through life, I would say. So just shortly, I will go into some of the segments that we've done in our previous podcast, but of course, open up the floor for us to discuss in detail more. So for Power of the Pen, about the author. Amy Key is a writer from Kent, which I believe is in the United Kingdom, and she actually had 2 poetry pamphlets published before writing and publishing the book that we're talking about today, Arrangements in Blue. The book started out as inspiration that Amy got from listening to the Blue album by Joni Mitchell, and that is woven throughout the entire book. She speaks of the different emotions and triggers that listening to that album really developed in her life, like these different emotions, and just kind of catapulted her to believing certain things based on this album. And the book actually was named Book of the Year by several different publications in Europe, such as the Sunday Times, the Independent, the Irish Times, and the Granta. So before we get into our portion where we kind of deep dive into the book, I do want to go ahead and take the time to introduce the other people we have on the call. So we do have my sister again, Felicia.
Hi.
And we do have one of my close friends on the line, Shani.
Hey.
And of course, me, Sam, coming back at you. All right, guys. So the next section that I have is POV, where in the past we have talked about our favorite or least favorite character. And because this book is primarily, I would say, memoir, I'm going to say, did you like the author? Like, did you, like, as you were listening or reading to this book, like, what were your feelings about the author herself as, like, a character in the book, I will say? And how did you feel about the friends that she may have, like, touched on or talked about in depth?
Right. So I would say, overall, I did like the author. I liked hearing her stories and that what she was sharing. It is a memoir and it felt very detailed. So that was something that I was drawn to. I will say specifically, I went by really the chapters of this is like my favorite moment. And I liked Strangers probably the most. I just connected with that the most. Honestly, there were so many people involved. It was ended up being hard to keep up. And I did this one as an Audible, and I usually get a printed copy. So that was also, I think it would have been better to have the printed copy. And I did get the printed copy, but it came in late. But there were a few friends that just seemed lackluster to me overall, right. I will say.
I would definitely agree that it's like the focus was definitely like her and her story for sure.
Mm-hmm. I will say though, I'm one person, and I'm pretty sure it's her sister, Rebecca. She always seemed to have a good relationship with her overall, or just like the ability to stay connected with her, even though she had like 5 siblings.
Right. Shani, anything to add?
Yeah, I would have to agree with the part about some of the friendships and the characters being lackluster besides Amy. I do resonate with Amy as a character, but the only friend that I truly remember was her friendship with Roddy.
Right.
So
yeah, that was like major.
Yeah, that was something that was memorable. So I agree with you there, Felicia.
Okay. So the next part we'll discuss, we like to call this section bookmark, where we talk about our favorite parts of the book or our favorite quotes in the book. And Alicia, I'll let you start.
I have 4. One is long, but the first one, I like the introductions, like the dedications, like acknowledgement. This was an acknowledgement at the beginning / like dedication. And it said, this book is for anyone who needs a love story of being alone. And from the beginning, I thought that was just so sweet. It was just so the thing that a poet would say of this is really for us, the people who are living alone. And then for an actual real quote, I think I'll start with this one. This is in Strangers. This is in the Strangers chapter / category. And it says, perhaps travel was less about glamour and more about developing the confidence to know I could look after myself in new, unpredictable environments. I hadn't realized glamour meant the ability to adapt to changes, to find ways to communicate in difficulty, to make myself heard when there's noise I cannot control. It turned out glamour was an action, not an aesthetic. It was glamorous to make my own arrangements, to pay my own bills, to decide when to stay and when to leave, to create my own rules for pleasure. Perhaps I was more glamorous than I thought.
That's so beautiful, and that I think goes to like the fact that she's a poet and like how a lot of the prose is just also just like very beautiful.
Yes. So Strangers, of course, it's a chapter, I think, about her learning to travel and to have solo trips. And for me, where I'm at, I'm learning to travel and have solo trips myself. I'm really entering this new young adult stage of my life. So for her to define glamour and then travel and what it means about, discovering who you are, it gave me hope to really define it for myself also. So that's the start of my quote. Do you want me to read the rest, or you want to go to the next?
I'm gonna do Shani's because the first one is pretty short. So I have that was all it took, and this quote, Shani, I have your note that you liked this quote because it reminded you of like being insatiable and like never giving a space for healthy relationships and taking more than like a boy or a man complimenting like your belt or I guess accessories or your body, etc.
Yeah, so let me elaborate just a little bit further. So this quote came in the beginning of the book when Amy was, I think, at a party and she was dancing with a guy that she just met. Mm-hmm. And all he did was compliment like something simple, like I think a skirt that she was wearing. Mm-hmm. So basically she's explaining, man, that's all it took for him to get my attention, or that's all it took for him to basically be somebody that I'm obsessed with, literally, or somebody that's I spend most of my time with. And it kind of brought me back to like adolescent me or like high school me, where that kind of was all it took, like getting attention or somebody recognizing something small about you for you to basically spend so much more time with them after that. And it just was the spiral of unhealthy relationships that she talks about after that. But that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because it reminded me of my adolescent self. And yeah, when I say Amy's character kind of resonates with me a lot of the things that she's gone through or a lot of the things that she deals with in relationships, like I can see myself in that as well.
Right. And the other one I had from you was all the grievances a child may have by being brought into the world, which I think I remember that quote. Like, I think it may have been when Amy was talking about like motherhood potentially.
Yeah, that whole section about Amy and the abortion that she had at 19 with her first, what she considers like her first and truly only boyfriend. Mm-hmm. She had an abortion at 19, and basically she talked about a section where she's terrified about like ruining a child, or like she's not ready for a child. And yeah, that part resonated with me too, just because of my journey with whether I want kids or don't want kids, and just a back and forth between whether I'm ready for them or not. So her decision making in that like tender age really was something that hit me like a ton of bricks as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like I tell people that all the time. Like, I think it's okay to say like, hey, I don't want kids because I just don't want to be a mom. And like, I think that's better because it's like you're recognizing the responsibility and the like great, toll it will take to be a parent. And I think that's something that people actually don't even think enough about. And I think it actually makes you a better parent if you admit that like, there's a certain fear of knowing that it is your responsibility to raise like this child and to give them, I think there's a responsibility to give them the best life that you possibly could, I think anyway. I'm going to do my 2 short quotes and then I'll pass it back to you, Felicia.
Okay.
So my first one is, I long to know I'm real beyond my own comprehension. It's not just intimacy I long for. It's that pact that couples have. I want to excuse myself from showing a problem. So I think this is when she's talking about partnership and like reasons why she wants partnership and like her longing for intimacy. And I think for me, I could definitely relate to that quote, right? Like, I think part of desiring partnership is because you don't have to take on the world alone, right? Like that's the whole idea of having a partner, like someone that can take on the challenges with you, that can sometimes lift the load or take on a heavier load than you for, depending on like what's going on in your life at that point in time. And I think that level of intimacy, for someone to know you so well that like they can comfort you and they can just take on more things when like you just can't at that moment in time. And then my other short quote would be, this was towards the end of the book, but I really liked it. It was, "Love is transformative, but it doesn't make sense to wait for romantic love to do the work of happiness for you." And I feel like you're smiling because that's probably something that you wrote down too.
That was one of my quotes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I really liked that one as well. I just felt like, yeah, like a relationship should not be what makes you happy. Like, I think it's okay to desire a relationship, to desire partnership, but it should not be the source of your happiness, because I think therein lies issues, right? Like when your relationship is the source of your happiness, then you could also fracture that relationship because you're relying so heavily on it to kind of make your life what you envision it, versus it being a source of just something that two people kind of pour into, so that also like pours into them. So like more of like a balanced relationship versus like relying on it 100% to make you happy. And I also think it's like that quote is recognizing the power of love and the importance of love, but also taking the time to say, do the work of being happy, like do the work of like figuring out what makes you happy outside of love, like what makes you as a person happy, whether you are in a relationship or not. I think.
Yes, I agree. It really came out to me of even the first line, "Love is transformative," and throughout the whole book, Amy really signifies how love is important, and it's okay to desire romantic love. It's okay to really long for it. And again, it's just this part of, you still have to do the work of being happy. You still have to do that work, inner work, I believe, of loving yourself also. And that goes back to, it connected really a lot to the whole solo trips aspect of when she was like discussing through that chapter of just even what does she want, and like what does she want a trip to even mean. She was saying, there was a part, it was like going off to holiday, it wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about really feeling what can make her smile. So I was just like, oh, that's great. That is the happiness work, right? It's not going about of like me seeking romance, but like what actually makes me happy is what I'm looking into for trips or just anything like that. So I love that quote. So funny that we picked the same. I will say that the last quote I had, it was towards the end, and it was kind of a list of just declarations she was having towards the end. And one, she kind of says, "I deserve to dream a good dream of the future. I've stopped waiting for it to begin." And again, I think it all connects to the theme of, yes, there's romantic love and I could dream for it, but I don't have to put my life on pause for it. So that goes to any dream too. I could dream to have a full-time offer. I could dream to one day like travel, but at the same time, I don't have to stay stagnant. I don't have to just like be in the house all day and just wait for this big thing to happen. I could enjoy the small moments. I could make life count right now, is what this quote really meant for me.
Right. I like that as well. So my paragraph is, "Resist this sense of a wavering self, incomplete until I attain a universally regarded achievement. I need to be intact with my own situation, fend off the sense of my status as a single childless, temporary, undesirable spell of my own provisionality as a subject. Self-love has to include a disregard for how other people might perceive you, living as though life is in the present, rather than something that will start in earnest when certain thresholds have been passed. I sometimes have to say aloud to myself, you do not agree that life's worth should be measured in this way. Don't give the idea the authority to direct your self-criticism for not measuring up. It feels like a life's work. Repeat it until you mean it. Say it like a friend would. Self-love is as much about not doing something as it is about doing something, is kind of what I took away from that. So I know that was really long, but that was when this is from the part where she's talking about what self-love means. And I think it also kind of ties in a little bit with the travel stuff as well, because she talked about self-love for her was like having certain routines, keeping her like place a certain way, and like establishing certain things for herself. And then it was also aligned with the part I recall from like where she was talking about how we have these great big parties for like when you graduate or when you like get married or whatever, and there has and it just go for me anyway. It was like, okay, that doesn't have to be the only thing you celebrate. Like as someone who's like loving yourself and embracing self-love, find those other areas in your life that can be markers that you celebrate. And this is actually in the flowers chapter, so I'm going to go ahead and say, like, find those other markers or other moments in your life where like you give yourself flowers or you give your friends flowers, like for achieving other things, and don't let the societal standard of like being partnered and getting married and those being the only things that we like recognize as achievements. Like there are other achievements. So that's kind of like, I just really like that section. Like I literally like rewinded, played so I could like really get it down. So
I do want to say I love the way Amy doesn't deviate really throughout the entire book away from having her routine, specifically when she's tending to her house or when she's throwing her parties with her friends. And it kind of just shows that she loved herself through self-love the entire way through this process, right? She craved romantic love and she desired romantic love, but she always loved herself first in those routines that she did. So
right,
I think that's important to note.
Right, like keeping something constant, like a constant routine in your life to kind of keep that reminder alive that I can be good to myself. Like I don't have to wait for someone else to be good to me.
And she was always reflecting on why she was doing certain things. I remember there was a part when she was hosting, she was also saying she liked the fact that she's hosting and not like preparing food or performing out of obligation because she had a partner. This truly was something she wanted to do.
Right. So the next section is Rose, Thorn, and Bud. So like, what are the highs and lows of the book for you? Like, what were some of the like moments that you read and you were like, oh man, like I'm really loving this, and like what were some of the moments where you were like, this is kind of tough to read? I'll go first and just say like the parts about pregnancy were a little tough for me to read. Like I felt like she was like very detailed about everything, and then it was also tough to read because I felt like she was on a roller coaster of emotions of between like wanting kids and not wanting kids. And it's like, I guess because that is an inner turmoil, right? As a woman, like embracing motherhood or not, or like what motherhood can look like if you don't necessarily have your own child. And I felt like that was like really tough to read. And I also felt like she was pretty detailed in those sections. And then the other section that was difficult for me to read was just her relationship with Roddy. And like loving someone, but they are basically engaging in like self-destructive behavior and having to come to, I just like a point of realizing you can only help someone else so much, right? Like if they don't want to help themselves, like you can only help them so much. So those were like the difficult parts for me to read.
Yeah, definitely. Roddy was difficult for me too, seeing how he was unstable, but also he was introduced as a mentor of hers, of a person like we're engaging in poetry. And this, we had this such deep connection to poetry and learning from you. And then, that was really tough to read and see the sadness within that. And then also for me, another section I would say was kind of the crazy section, and that one, it was where she, I think, really doubted herself the most in this book, where she couldn't trust the choices she was making about romantic love. And that was because she was pressured to do a lot of things, and she didn't realize that these are red flags actually in a relationship, that this is actually assault in a relationship. And for that was very difficult to read too, because that was also something I felt was very detailed in just the way she is a writer. And I would say overall, this, I think also might be because like I'm young and I also don't like super listening to music, but all the music references and just Joni Mitchell, that was hard to keep up for me because I didn't know Blue Album, and just like, and I listened to it and I just felt like this feels very melancholy. So just keeping up with it, it was just like, I didn't see that type of connection. So yeah.
Gotcha.
I think for me, the hardest part to read and the part where I kind of lost interest a lot was when she was talking about having roommates. She was trying to basically make her home her own, but she had a roommate, and the way she described like almost being territorial over shared property, like that was a little bit hard to stomach. I understand her point of view in that she really just craved having her own, and she wanted to make it her own and that was part of her romantic love would be like the gesture of being domesticated. The way she described it, it was almost like she did not like being roommates with somebody because she felt like she should have her own place. And just, I just don't like the way it came across. It came across as territorial to me. And I'll agree with you guys too. The destruction and deterioration of Roddy was very, very hard to listen to. Just how, again, detailed she was with his condition and like his liver damage and parts of him being in basically hospice. And it was extremely detailed. And just knowing that that was a friend of hers for so long, it was sad to witness that she didn't even know he died until she saw it on the Facebook group page. So,
Right.
and she created the Facebook group. So it was just like, man, that's tough.
Yep, that was a tough one. That was definitely tough. I think my high moments were just like every moment where she kind of reinforced like self-love. My other high moments were just like those moments where I was reading and I was like, oh, like I can totally relate. Like times when she talked about her relationship with money and like trying to like get out of debt. She was talking about how really like the impulse buying was sometimes like, well, I deserve this thing and no one else is going to get it for me. So so getting it for myself. And then her relationship with her cats, which you guys know, like I'm a cat mom. So like stuff like that. And I was like, it was just like relatable in a lot of like other ways. And so like I found those moments enjoyable.
Yeah. For me, I mentioned it before. I really loved Strangers. Two other things about it. There was one time she mentioned, every trip was relearning how to be alone. So that self-discovery that she's going through felt very true and I could relate to. And then just like a tip when she was solo traveling and just something that she was getting through to go over it. She was like, I adopted a persona for solo travel, even though sometimes she didn't have like the full confidence to do certain things, to get over it, to go to a restaurant alone, to book the trip. She just adopted a persona for a little bit, not trying to say she's changing herself, but just something to boost her confidence. All of that was very something interesting and that I liked overall. And throughout the book, how overall, she mentioned this in the beginning, but I think it was a theme throughout the book. It's okay to have romantic love, but she also mentioned like it's being brave to say out loud you want romantic love. So I think that nod to, it's okay to be alone and it's okay to have romantic love is something that I valued throughout the book.
Right. Anything to add, Shani?
Yeah, so mine's really different. Not trying to be too graphic here, so I guess trigger warning. But my favorite parts were all of her toxic relationships. I know that sounds really weird, but it just reinforced to me, like during my formative years when I was just trying to figure out what relationships were about, it just reinforced to me that during those times, like I was not alone, kind of. It was almost cathartic in a way to see her live that. And I was in the process reliving like all those relationships that probably shouldn't have happened. And that was honestly my favorite part because it to me was closing the chapter finally in my life on all those relationships that just didn't work out for the best, or all the times that you had a one-night stand, or all the times that you kind of let people use you in a way that you shouldn't have.
Right. Yeah, I definitely was like that feeling of like, oh, I'm not alone in this. Like we all kind of like make mistakes and that sort of thing. I definitely identified with that as well. But there's two more sections that I would like to do. So I'm going to ask your writing wish. And then after that, I have some questions on like that. Like as I was just listening to the book, these questions came in mind and we might get cut off. So that's why I want to go to the writing wish and then go into the questions. So just in case. So I will start with the writing wish, which is just where we talk about what are we like looking forward to? Like what is our wish for this book? Like, is there anything else that we would have wanted to know more in this book? Is there anything in this genre that we are necessarily looking to? Like, is this a genre that we might read again? And do you think this needs a sequel or anything like that?
Yeah, let me start off with that. I know, Felicia, you mentioned like the mention of Joni Mitchell and the songs and the way Amy ties the songs to what she's going to say next was kind of hard to follow. But I actually really enjoyed that format, not because I know or claim to know a lot about music or Joni Mitchell or any of the artists that she brings up, but I just like that she basically paid tribute to her deep love of music and then tied it in to the next segue that she had to say about whatever chapter. So it was just a different layout for me, and I just really enjoyed having a layout that I don't generally see when reading a book. So I don't know, I thought that was enjoyable. I don't think this book needs a sequel. I everything that's said, it's kind of like she tied it up really neatly. And remind me of the two questions.
Like, would you read this genre? Like, would another book like that has like that's in kind of like in this genre, like memoir or talk about relationships or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good relationship book, but I kind of don't want to relive anything that's kind of negative in terms of her relationship past. So, like I said, close the chapter on that. So, probably wouldn't want to dive too much into like triggering relationship genres, but I like the memoir style, so we can continue in that.
Yeah. So I would say I was interested. I feel like it didn't have as much, but she was talking about examples of love or romantic love that was there. She talked a little bit about her parents' divorce, but she talked about her grandparents and that how they had a routine. So just hearing more stories about that is something I would be interested in. It was interwoven, but it's just like if there was a second book, like I think there's more room for that. And then also, I would definitely read more on love, and especially on the sense of there's romantic love, there's community love, there's friendship love. I would love to hear more about those aspects. But I also don't think Amy needs to write about that per se. It would be that's like the next type of book I would read. I think Bell Hooks has a book that's like all about love that kind of does that. And I just say that to say I loved Amy's story, that this was hers. So I think this was really good. Like these are her notes, these are her thoughts, and I think it is good where it's at.
I agree with both of you 100% on those things. So our last part is bookish, where we kind of talk about the book, but like how it might remind us of like things that we are experiencing in our own like real life. So I had some just like relatable moments that kind of sparked some questions, and I'll ask like maybe two before we like log off basically. So first one would be, do you remember what ignited your interest in romantic love? So as we talked about, like Joni Mitchell and the album Blue is kind of like what kind of was her spark, and it's kind of like her inspiration in this book. And I think she does talk about how it is what ignited like her interest and desire for romantic love. So I wanted to ask, do you even remember being like ignited for an interest in romantic love, and like what was it?
Yeah, it was reading for me, honestly. Probably specifically reading Wattpad stories at the beginning at a very young age, and just seeing that romantic love could happen to me and what other like people see it as. I will say though, like from a young age, I've had representations of love that I saw, but that was like my parents, my aunt and uncle. But it was just like, that's just there. But reading, it made it more open of like, no, this is a whole world that I could be a part of.
Mine is going to sound a little pop culture corny, but truly and honestly, it was Degrassi. I just remember just being young and watching Degrassi and thinking, this is insane, but I like the back and forth. It really goes there. Like they were experiencing stuff that I wish I could have been a part of, but like I never felt like in the communities I was in that I was ever of interest to anyone, and I was like honestly craving attention and affection. So yeah, it was Degrassi for me, and it was wanting to do things differently than I've seen represented. So like you said, Felicia, you have your parents and your aunt and uncle as representation of like healthy love for you. And it's not that I didn't have representation of healthy love. I just wanted love and romantic love so I can do it differently and do it my way.
And then my other question that we will close out on was,
wait, you didn't answer.
sorry. My answer, I think for me, I was trying really hard to think about this, and I think mine is also like TV movie related. So this is gonna sound really like ridiculous and funny, but
Pride and Prejudice.
no, not Pride and Prejudice. Like even further back, like I'm thinking about like when I was a kid, and my family tells me like, you know, I was very like creative and imaginative, and like I had like imaginary friends, and like I even had like an imaginary boyfriend named George or something like that, and like they would ask me like, how's George doing and stuff like that, and I'm just like I must have gotten that from like TV and movies and stuff, like seeing people partnered. So like I imagine it must have been either like some Disney movie or George of the Jungle, like I don't know, like I must have watched something and like put it in my head that like it would be fun or nice to have like a boyfriend or something. So the other question was, Amy talks about how hosting friends is like her forum and where she kind of shines. And she
Mhm.
talks about how it like sheds her insecurities and it makes her feel loved. And I wanted to know like what are your forums, or like where do you think you shine, and or what do you do or engage in that makes you feel like you don't have insecurities in that space and you feel like, you know, appreciated or loved in that space.
Mm. So I will say two. One is also hosting. I've hosted. It started out, I think, in undergrad. Me and my friends, we didn't have money, so I would host a lot of like do ourselves type of things. Like, you know what, we're gonna do a sip and paint at home because we can't buy the sip and paint tickets. We're gonna like I'm gonna host a big like elaborate movie night, that type of thing. And that went into why I wanted to become an RA to host the programs and stuff like that. And even now, like I'm the programming chair at my school and like one of the organizations. I think that's been a testament throughout. And I feel valued. I feel love. I feel energy when I do it, that type of thing. And then I think the other part would be when I start like creating in general. Like right now, I'm really big into scrapbooking. But before it was like trying to do calligraphy and different things like that. Those are moments where, you know what, I don't even need anybody to affirm this for me. Like I love it myself. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I definitely feel valued and loved when I'm helping somebody. So definitely when there's no expectation of receiving anything back, or they're not even expecting, you know, any assistance, or they don't think that anybody is there for them, or showing up in those moments like when somebody's really just grieving or whatever the case may be, but just being that person that they would not expect to help out, but actually helping. I think that's when I feel the most like love and value because of how appreciative they are. And then and I do also want to say I feel a lot of self love when I'm alone. So I don't know if that really answers the question much, but just being in solitude has just brought me a lot of peace sometimes.
Yeah. I think for a long time it was like my writing, because I felt like I was a good writer, I was a strong writer, I enjoyed like creating stories. And then like even academically, like people, I've had professors be like, oh, like you should help this student with like writing or whatever. So for a long time it was writing, but I think now it's strangely, I don't want to call it hosting necessarily, but like, you know, I'm really into wine, I'm really into game nights and stuff like that. And I really do enjoy doing that. And I really enjoy bringing like the people that I'm close to together for like, to like share in something that I really enjoy and really like. But I don't want to call it hosting because I don't like hosting in general and I'm still like fairly introverted. So it's not like I would host just anything. It like has to be a specific thing that I'm like sharing an interest of mine with others. So I would say it's whatever that is. It's that. But I just want to say thank you both for this conversation. It was great. I feel like this book, memoirs sometimes tend to be heavy, but I feel like this book really strikes a really good balance, and I feel like I enjoyed it overall. And I appreciate the time that you guys took to like listen to the book and, you know, share your experience and just like how you felt about it with me. So thank you so, so, so much. And have a wonderful rest of your day, guys.
Thank you.